Good morning. It is 10:03 a.m. on Sunday, March 19th, 2019. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up, more or less, yeah. Today is Sunday. This is 5 more minutes, and so because it's Sunday, I'm continuing my rewatch of Gravity Falls, the Disney XD animated series, with Season 2, Episode 5, Soos and the Real Girl. So, although it doesn't really make any sense that kids would be able to pick up on the reference in the title, it is, of course, a reference to a movie called Lars and the Real Girl, which stars Ryan Gosling. It was from 2007 and features a man whom has trouble interacting with real people, and he buys essentially one of these, real girl, sex doll, mannequin, fancy mannequin, essentially. And he treats this real girl like she's actually his girlfriend, and everyone's kind of worried about it, but they sort of try to help him through it. That's what that movie is about. So the title is obviously referenced there, and the parallel in the story is not hard to see because, of course, as the episode begins, we get a brief reminder of how helpful Soos is at the Mystery Shack when he helps Mabel get her braces unstuck from the screen door, which, as someone who once did have braces, that's kind of a terrifying prospect. And I like that Mabel is appropriately terrified when it happens, immediately going to trying to dictate her will in case she dies from that. But in any event, that's all just kind of a setup to lead to the question, what does Soos do when he goes home from work? And the answer apparently is sit on the couch and play video games, which, But his abuelita, grandmother, starts to ask him about when he is going to start acting like a grown-up. And in particular, references the idea that he might need to find a girl. And he's initially defensive and insists that he could easily find a girl anytime he wants, and so essentially promises to find a date in 1 week in time for his cousin Reggie's engagement party. And so that's suddenly a challenge because even though he was defensive to his abuelita, he is immediately recognizing, oh, I don't know what to do about getting a date. He's never been on a date. He's awkward in that context, which is interesting because I think it's absolutely a real phenomena to have someone who seems to act very casually and perhaps even obliviously in social situations, so long as there isn't that additional pressure of, like, this is a date. If he's not trying to impress anybody, he's fine. Like, we see him interact with all manner of different people, and it's all fine. He's just being himself. He's confident. He's sweet and funny and all of those things, except that as soon as the prospect of it being a date is brought up, now he's suddenly awkward. And so Dipper and Mabel decide that they're going to help him. They take him to the mall, and there are lessons of, like, eye contact, and of course eye contact is a perfect example of something where it's like used appropriately, very important, but it can also be done to an excessive or creepy way. And there's lots of fun stuff with him holding his eyes open, eye contact, that sort of thing. And then of course him attempting casual conversation and just bringing up the time that he body swapped with a pig. And then, of course, just making a mess of everything. It's not going very well. And it's actually a nice detail that we do see Melody in the background during that sequence, but he doesn't talk to her because, of course, that's who he has a real date with later. But this all leads to them going to the video game store and finding this, video game dating simulator game. And let's see, I have the, let's see, Romance Academy 7 is the name of it, supposedly. Will virtually improve your dating skills. And I think that it's an interesting, direction to go with this. And also the foreshadowing is kind of comically on the nose, in the sense that they get it out in the bargain bin, and the shop clerk literally tells them, "Are you sure you want to buy that? It's been returned 3 times, and the last time it came back with a note saying that it should be destroyed at all costs." And also an interesting bit of detail on this note that saying it should be destroyed at all costs. Someone actually drew out by hand the little table flipping emoticon. And since the whole point of emoticons is to allow you to make those little drawings with ASCII characters, it's kind of silly to draw them by hand. Like if you're writing a handwritten note and you want to make a smiley face, you don't turn it sideways like the little emoticon do. That's weird. Anyway, it's kind of fun though. But they decide to buy it anyway because, of course, what could it hurt? It could only help. He's that bad. And so that's the idea. So Soos tries it out. And, of course, because it is one of these, romance simulator games, it creates a superficial impression of him improving his skills. And I guess in some respects, because Soos is sort of unrealistically, comically inept at dating, it's one thing, like, so the initial question of that the game presents, the choices of, "Hey, do you want to carry my books?" And one answer is, "Yeah, sure." And then another answer is, "I'm impatient, date me now." And that's what he clicks initially. So that's a little bit like, yeah. But as is demonstrated later, even though he becomes obsessed with this game, he learns a little bit about Giffany, pronounced with the hard G, which is correct. And they make a joke about the pronunciation, but that's the Giffany is the pronunciation they run with. In any event, he's obsessed. He misses work for the first time ever, apparently, to do this. And so Dipper and Mabel are concerned. But in theory, he feels like he has learned better how to date. But of course, what happens when he goes and starts trying to talk to real girls again is that they don't give him an undo option. They don't let him choose again if he makes the wrong decision. He doesn't have just a list of choices to select from. And so it's kind of revealed that although it may have helped him with some of the basics, ultimately the things that it takes to be really good at the game are not actually the same as the things that it takes to be good at flirting in real life. And so he's struggling with that. And yet, of course, now Giffany is jealous, following him around. And so let's see. In the meantime, so we get Soos frustrated, and we find, Giffany's followed him and basically says, those other girls are not going to be able to help you like I can. And he's initially kind of relieved because he's thinking, yeah, you're right. But it's also pointed out to him, Giffany can't come with him to the party, though. And it's one thing, though, I think there's an implication there that we would want to avoid, which is this idea that real people who might have some limitations, where that limitation is, like if you had someone, for example, made friends with someone who had some kind of a disability that prevented them from doing some activity, that's not necessarily a reason not to date them, right? But that's not really what we're talking about here, of course, because as part of feeling a little bit more relaxed with this prospect of Giffany, Soos finally does connect with Melody, who is also kind of a big kid at heart, and sees Soos's humor and sweetness, and he's a little bit more practiced with the basics now. And so because there isn't that same kind of pressure initially, he does connect with her, and there's talk of going on a date with her. But of course now Giffany is super jealous. And so although he's torn, he pauses Giffany to go on this date with Melody. She's furious. Giffany, that is, tries to follow into the arcade. And then, of course, this sets up the climax where nobody believes him at first, but then Dipper and Mabel are there. Giffany takes over the animatronics at this Chuck E. Cheese analog, and it's a whole big thing. There's actually kind of a really nice moment of bravery for Soos when he recognizes that Giffany is trying to hurt Melody, and he's really determined to protect her, but not just because he's a man and he should protect the woman, but because he recognizes this is his fault. And so him braving the onslaught of skee balls and animatronics with big claws to try to defeat Giffany. And ultimately he does by throwing the disc into the oven, the pizza oven. And that finally, gets rid of Giffany once and for all. Although my understanding is that in one of the comics, she came back after all. But in any event, so the lesson, Soos learns here is that, while it's one thing to say that, some of the basics of a video game are something that, you could learn things, but they don't necessarily actually prepare you for the real world. And the real world has things to offer that video games don't. And so it's kind of nice that Soos is able to connect with Melody, even though there's the bittersweet reveal that she's only in town for a little while. And so although she can go with him to this party, she can't stay. She can't be his longtime girlfriend. And so that's, it's a little bit bittersweet there, but at the same time, Soos has learned a great lesson. And most importantly, he has learned that he is capable of potentially getting a date. And so if he's more interested again, he's better prepared. In the meantime, obviously, during this whole sort of, the A plot of the episode, we also have the B plot of Stan and Old Goldie, which is just great. It's great stuff. And the parallels to the main plot are not as obvious until towards the end, but we have the opening of it where it's just this old mechanical attraction that's in the Mystery Shack, and it's kind of hilariously bad in the sense that it's supposed to just be one of those little things where you put a coin in it and it does something to the coin, but instead, because it's broken, the eyes pop out and shoot sparks, oil barfs out the mouth, and it just makes a screaming noise, which it terrifies the little kid and is just super hilarious. And so Stan, of course, is saying, time to get rid of this. And then he becomes enthralled with the animatronic badger at this Chuck E. Cheese restaurant and saying he wants to steal that, especially because when he tries to buy it, the guy implies he's too old to manage animatronics. But of course, then when Giffany brings all the animatronics to life, the badger starts fighting Stan. He's terrified, and then it's revealed only that this badger is defeated when it chases after Stan into the garbage, and Old Goldie, who had been dumped there, bites his arm. And then we get a hilarious ending credits montage where Stan takes Old Goldie to Vegas, and it's implied that they're successful at gambling, but then they get in trouble, and they ride in a helicopter, and they get married, and it's very silly. So that's all kind of a fun parallel, but the idea that it's Stan at the end that is, having a relationship and gets married to the animatronic Old Goldie, it's very silly. But anyway, that'll do it for this week. And next week, of course, we'll be talking about Little Gift Shop of Horrors. Woo! And tomorrow, I'll talk to you 4 or 5 more minutes.